So after X-Men First Class in 2013, we were treated to the movie The Wolverine, the second of the solo Wolverine adventures. And this film is a kind of direct continuation of the movie X-Men Last Stand. But does it hold up to scrutiny? Let us find out in my retrospective review for The Wolverine. Hello. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review series for the X-Men franchise of movies. A film series where a lot of them I haven't visited for some considerable time and I've never actually watched them in quick succession, and I wanted to see how they hold up being watched at that kind of a pace. So here we are with the movie The Wolverine, the second of the Wolverine trilogy, if you will. This was released on the 25th of July of 2013 here in the UK with a 12A rating and a runtime of 2 hours and 6 minutes. The film would see an extended cut get a release to physical media, and for the purposes of this revisit review, that is the version that I have watched. Now, had I put the original, the non-extended cut on, the theatrical cut, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between the two. I wouldn't be able to tell you, if you'd put it on for me, I wouldn't be able to tell you what version I am watching. The film came at us directed by James Mangold, who would go on later to give us the movie Logan, but also he would give us last year's fantastic Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny that I fell asleep at during an IMAX screening. That says it all. The film was written by Mark Bombach, who prior to this had given us Total Recall, the remake movie, but he also went on to write Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes. The film was also written by Scott Frank, who would go on to give us The Wolverine, but he'd also given us the Steven Soderbergh movie Out of Sight and also Steven Spielberg's Minority Report. So it's two very strong writers in their own right there. The film saw the return of Hugh Jackman as Logan, Famke Janssen pops up as Jean Grey, and the rest of the cast is pretty much popped up by a wealth of Asian actors. And I'm going to butcher some names for you right now. So we have Rila Fukushima as Yukio, Teo Okamolo as Mariko, Teo Okamolo as I said Mariko already. Hiroyuki Sanada as Shingen, Ken Yamamura as young Yoshida, Hao Yamanouchi as old Yoshida, William Lee as Harada, and also we had Svetlana Kodchekanova as Lady Viper. I'm glad I've got that one out of the way. Apologies for the butchering therein. Now, this film here was made on a budget of $120 million and went on to see a worldwide gross of just shy of $415 million. Critics' consensus gave it a 71%. This is on the aggregate site Rotten Tomatoes. We know how great they are. And audience score was 69%, so positive for the most part. But this film here, it starts on August the 9th of 1945 during the events of the latter part of Second World War in the Pacific, specifically the day when the American forces dropped the second of 2 atomic bombs on Japan. This one here was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. The first one was Hiroshima, which happened 3 days earlier on August the 6th. This brought about the end of 129,000 civilian lives approximately. Hideous, but a show of force had to be made by the Americans to prevent more loss of life of their own people. And this was a decision they decided to make. And here we find Logan. He's a prisoner of war in a Japanese camp. he's being held in a hole in the ground, in an isolation chamber, essentially, for what we don't know. And they see the plane coming over. They see the aeroplane coming over. They know what's coming, but there's one individual by the name of Yashida, and he's a soldier who frees some of the prisoners to let them run to safety, whatever good that will do. And he attempts to free Logan himself. And while he's about to commit harry-carry, Logan saves him, chucks him down into the hole with him, and he shields him with a large bit of metal and himself to stop him succumbing to the nuclear blast. And so begins a friendship between these two. The film then jumps forward to like kind of modern times, where it's set after the events, sometimes several years after the events of X-Men Last Stand, and we find Logan living in isolation. He's now a tortured soul, haunted by memories, by dreams of Jean Grey and what he had to do to her at the end of that movie. He has dreams of her in bed with him, and they're in love, but they're not together. But he wakes up from these dreams, these nightmares, having stabbed her in the bed and things like this. He's living in isolation in the forest, in the woods, where he goes after these individuals that have cruelly killed this bear by using this poison. And he kind of dispatches of them. He then gets found and taken to Japan because his old friend, Yashida, is at the end of his life, and he wants to thank Wolverine personally for what he'd done to him back in the day. He wants to say his goodbyes to him, but he doesn't really. When he gets there, he comes to find out that this old fella actually wants his powers, actually wants to carry on living. He doesn't want to die. He knows that Wolverine is a tortured soul. He knows that there's a kind of sadness to living all these years and seeing everyone around you die. And he says to him, I'll take your powers off of you. They found a way of doing this. I'll take them off of you and you can die an older man. It won't kill you straight away. You can just live out the rest of your life normally. Wolverine doesn't really agree to this because he sees this as being a curse that he doesn't want to put on to someone else. So he kind of declines, but he gets brought into this political power struggle between this family and who's going to head up the family business after the death of Yashida. And it either goes to his son or his granddaughter, but he leaves it to his granddaughter, much to the dismay of his son who wants the power. So begins this struggle and this story of Wolverine getting involved in that, losing his powers for a bit anyway, which is kind of a comic book sequel go-to storyline, isn't it? You know, Superman 2, Spider-Man 2, they all done this sort of a thing. And so begin this journey where Wolverine, he falls in love with the granddaughter and all this sort of thing, and makes friends along his way until the end. We get this big final third act, which is where the film kind of plummets in that it goes back to generally what is a normal third act for a superhero film, like a big metallic bloody geezer in a suit kind of a thing. But yeah, so this film here, like, I've got to say, the Wolverine I've never been as enamoured with as what other people have been. You know, people have always like raved about this film for the most part when it came out, and I'll be honest, James Mangold as a director, he's not bad. He's a decent director. He's a very accomplished director. He knows what he's doing, but his stuff doesn't really work for me. And therein lies the problem with this film for me. It has a very lagging pace to it. And it's got characters that are very unappealing. Aside from Logan, Hugh Jackman himself, who delivers a fantastic performance, and he looks great in this film. Everyone else is very unappealing. There's such a grim tone to this movie. But it was a nice departure from the other X-Men films when watching in quick succession. I actually enjoyed the watch of it. I did think it was somewhat overlong, but I like the way that the X-Men films, same with X-Men First Class, kind of put itself into real past events. So with X-Men First Class, obviously you've got the Cuban Missile Crisis, you've got the origins of Magneto, and here, set in the opening during the atomic bomb drops on Japan, is fantastic and creates a great setting, putting Wolverine into these realistic things that makes it feel more real worldy. Now the film does have some very good visceral action set pieces in it all the way through. The train top scene is very good. The scene where he's fighting all the ninjas in the town towards the end, there's some quality stuff in this movie, and there's a lot thematically, there's a lot of strong themes, but however, like I said, it doesn't hold together solely because of the pacing. The pacing is dreadful, and this is one of the problems that I have with a lot of James Mangold films, is that the pacing, he paces differently, he paces slower. And I'm not going to go into Indiana Jones, but that's why Indiana Jones completely failed for me. James Mangold was the wrong director, but he has made some good films in his career, I'll give him that. So here we are, we're given a film for me of two halves, a film that I think on a rewatch I would possibly avoid at times, but it was a nice departure from the other X-Men movies to give us something that is tonally different, that is tonally slower, that is grimmer, that is grittier, albeit let's go with everything in that final third act. So it's a funny film. It's a funny film for me in that regard. So would I reckon it? I enjoyed the watch of it, even though I'm critical of it here, and I am aware of the film's failings, and there's quite a few of them. I still had fun with it, which is, the film doesn't have any fun in it. I had fun, I enjoyed watching it. I shouldn't use the word fun, because it's not a fun film. It's a grim film. But there's some fantastic stuff in it. Now, obviously, I know the comic books that this is sort of loosely based upon. The Japan stuff with that Wolverine had in the comics back in the day. I've not read them for a very long time, but I appreciate that they sort of drew on source material for it. And yeah, and we've got a good musical score by Marco Beltrami in there as well, thrown into the fray, that helps bring the film to life. So yeah, it's kind of a very middle of the table X-Men film for me. We got a fantastic ending though. We got a brilliant ending that sees the return of Patrick Stewart and sees the return of Ian McKellen in an airport scene where you're left questioning. Hold on a minute. How is it that Patrick Stewart has come back? He got killed at the end of X-Men, or during the events of X-Men The Last Stand. Now, obviously, we can say, okay, well, he's alive because, we saw the consciousness of Professor X get put into the other body at the end of that very X-Men film. But actually, if we take a step forward into Days of Future Past and the events in that and the reshuffle of the timeline, at the end of that film, it would now make it that Professor X didn't actually die. So has this ripple effect already taken place before the events of Days of Future Past? Therein lies the question, and that leads me into what will be my next review in a week's time. X-Men Days of Future Past. Is it a highlight in the X-Men franchise, or does that one not stand up to scrutiny anymore? Look forward to that. So let me know your comments down below on this movie, what you thought of it, and let's talk X-Men. See you then. Bye-bye.